Demonstration nugget, using Python with Google Cloud SQL. Hello everybody, this is Ben Finkel. In this nugget, I'm going to show you how to use a couple of different Python libraries, very similar but different Python libraries, to connect up to your Google Cloud SQL instances. These libraries can actually connect to any MySQL database, but we're going to take a look at how to use them in the context of Google Cloud SQL. We'll start with the library MySQLDB, MySQLDB, found out here in PyPI, and this is kind of what Google officially recommends in their documentation that you should use to interface with Google Cloud SQL instances. It's easy to get from PyPI. You can see it right out here in the PyPI package index, and if you don't know how to use pip in PyPI, check out the CBT Nuggets course on Python. We have a brief overview of it. It's actually very easy to do. I'm just going to launch my terminal window here, and I'm going to run a sudo-e pip install mysql-python. This will get me the latest and greatest version of mysql-python, the MySQLDB library. You can get a specific version if you know how to use your pip syntax. You hit enter, it downloads, it installs. It's very easy to do. Now, in order for this to work, of course, I got to have Python installed already. It's a Python library. I also need to make sure that I have the MySQL client tools installed on my system. And the easiest way to do that is to simply download and install MySQL. Go and check out the Oracle MySQL website. It's very easy to download and run the installation program on whatever system you're on. So you got to have those tools up and running. You also notice in my sudo statement I used the -e command. That's because I had to carry through a few environment variables that are important on OS X 10.8. If you're on 10.9 or newer, don't worry about it. That's not important, but I did need that on OS X 10.8. Now, once I've downloaded and installed this, it's easy to use. Check it out. First, we're going to want to set up access control on our instance. So we're going to go to cloud.google.com and select Go to My Console after we're signed in with the appropriate Google account so that we can get access to the project that we want to work with. In my case, it's GSQL Nuggets. Then over here on the left-hand side, we're going to expand storage and choose Cloud SQL. Select the instance that we want to work with. I'm going to work with the D1- instance. And select the Access Control tab here. Now from this panel, we need to do a couple of different things. A, you need to make sure that you have an external IP address assigned to your instance. I already have one assigned to this instance. I'm going to go ahead and get that copied onto my clipboard. You also need to make sure that you have a root password set, at least for this demo. I'm going to set it to Ben is cool because I am. Click set. That's going to make sure that I can log in as the root user. Now, in a typical production scenario, of course, you don't want to be logging on as root. I'm just doing that for demonstration purposes. You want to log in as root once, create some MySQL users, and then use those user accounts subsequently to log in and do your work. The last thing that you need to do is make sure that your local IP address, or whatever IP address you're going to be running this Python program from, is whitelisted down here in authorized networks. And you can see I've already got my local IP address whitelisted, so I'm good to go there. So I've got my IP address, I got my root password. I'm going to jump over and take a look at my code. And the basic code for using MySQLDB and actually using the connector that we're going to show in a minute here is really simple and straightforward. A, you got to make sure that you import the library. That's why we did those previous steps, downloading and executing the pip install. That allows us to import this MySQLDB library into our Python program now. Then you need to create this database object, and you do that with the mysqldb.connect command. And you got to pass in a couple of variables to get a good solid connection. First, you need the host. That's going to be the IP address of the Google Cloud SQL server that I just copied onto my clipboard. And then I need a username and password. Well, like I said, I'm going to log in as user root. I made my password Ben is cool. Also notice that I've set a default database to be database 1. I already know that I've got a database and a table set up from an earlier nugget that I worked in. The database 1 has a table called employees in it. So once I've done this, then I can create a cursor on my database. I do that with this statement right here, cursor equals db.cursor. I can execute statements on that cursor, such as a select star from employee. Like I said, I already know that I've got a table called employee inside of this database 1 schema. And then I can just iterate through the results with a simple statement like this. For name and cursor, print name. So my cursor object was populated with a tuple of the results from my select statement. I can go ahead and make sure that this is saved. And then if I bring up my terminal window and simply call python mysqldb1.py, bam, we see the results come out in the tuple from my simple statement. So using MySQLDB is really simple and straightforward. Really, the complexity in it comes in getting it installed and set up on your system. I happen to notice that I'm on macOS 10.8, which is kind of an older version now, but I had some struggles with getting it up and running. And one of the important things to do is make sure that not only is Python and MySQL DB installed properly in your system, but you want to make sure that your bash profile is set up correctly with the correct environment parameters. I'm going to show that off right here. So the top few lines here are ones that I had to add into my profile by hand to make sure that everything worked appropriately. Notice I had to add user local MySQL bin to my path file, and I had to create this DYLD library path pointing to user local MySQL lib. Lastly, these two flags operations here. Again, this is for 10.8. It's going to be different if you're in Linux, it's going to be different if you're in Windows, and it's going to be different if you're in newer versions of Macintosh OS. But if you run into some of the problems that I ran into, make sure that you have these variables set in your profile in your environment. We also want to take a brief look at an alternative connector. This is one directly from MySQL, from Oracle itself. You can find that at mysql.com, whack products, whack connector. And we're going to want the Python driver for MySQL right here. You can see there's actually a lot of different options, a lot of different connectors, ADO.NET, ODBC, C++, etc. I happen to think that these are a lot easier to use than the MySQL DB library. I'm not entirely certain why Google documentation recommends the previous library that we just showed. It also indicates in the documentation that you can use these connectors. So if you're asking me, I say use these instead of MySQL-Python. They're certainly easier to install and set up. You're simply going to click the download button here, select your platform, and choose download. You will have to sign in with your email address in Oracle. If you don't have an account, you got to sign up for a free account. It doesn't cost any money, but they want your email address to track this stuff. Once it's downloaded, you simply launch the DMG file and run your package installer for MySQL. It's very easy to do. Just choose the defaults, let it install itself, and it will install the MySQL connector right into your system. And when it's complete, you click close, and you are ready to go with the MySQL connector. How do you use that? Well, very simply. Take a look at the code here. It's actually very similar to the connector that we just used. To start with, you got to import mysql.connector. So you got to make sure that you import what you want to the library that you're going to work with. Then below there, you use the mysql.connector.connect function, same as we used in the previous library. The variables that you pass in are slightly different. Notice it's password instead of passwd, and database instead of db. But you simply make sure that you fill in these things properly, and this needs to be database1. Don't want to mess that up. After that, it looks pretty much exactly the same. You create a cursor with the db.cursor command, you execute it, and then you can print out the results. I make sure to close my connection here at the end of my code. And you're always going to want to make sure you do that, clean up your memory space, right? To run this, well, very simply, we're just going to make sure it's saved, launch our terminal window, and I'm going to run Python MySQL 2, MySQL db2.py. And oops, something didn't work right there. Table employees does not exist. I put an extra S on my employees table. It's just employee. Hey, you know what? That's a good lesson learned. You should always use error handling in your code so you don't get ugly crashes like that. So particularly when you're working with a database remotely, you want to make sure that you capture your errors. So here it is. It runs successfully, Benjo Sam, just like before. Notice it's slightly different. These are some variations, some differences in the way that the libraries work with the data. But ultimately, this is how you connect to and execute SQL statements against your databases. You can also find a ton of great libraries out there for object relational mapping, ORM, that will work nicely with either of these two connectors inside of Python, so you can really get some quick, efficient database code up and running. Alright, that concludes this demonstration nugget on using Python with Google Cloud SQL. You saw we took a look at two different libraries, the MySQL DB library, which is the recommended library from Google, as well as the official MySQL connector library that Oracle provides. Either library works perfectly well for connecting to and using your Cloud SQL instances. You know what? There's also a whole host of other free open source options out there. Go ahead and use whichever one you're most comfortable and familiar with in order to connect to your Google Cloud SQL instances. The process is going to be more or less the same that we saw here. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.